Hey, what's up y'all? Quentin here with Catfish Karma, and today's video is the third and final episode of a little mini series of rod building videos all about this. This is the nicest, most high-tech back bouncing rod for trophy catfishing that I have ever built. Episode number 1 was about component selection and putting this handle together. Episode number 2 was about these guides and getting them wrapped and properly clocked on this blank. But with all that out of the way, it's time for the finishing touches so I can have this ready to go to the water, and it starts right now. Alright y'all, as I mentioned in the intro, today's video is all about finishing this project. And I mean that sort of figuratively and literally. You see, these guides are technically finished. I could fish with this rod, but they require a clear coat epoxy to protect them so that it'll last a lifetime. And I haven't done that process yet. I haven't even started it because I wanted to point out a couple things to you before I do so. First off, even though I've already done some load testing on this blank, for me, every rod that I build, once I get it to this point when I'm ready to put the finish on there, I'm going to put it in my deflection stand over there and I'm going to fully load this. I'm going to load it up with weights that it's likely to encounter in general use, and then I'm going to max it out and check the load sharing throughout the blank to make sure that the guides are where I want, because once I put finish on here, it's too late. So after that, because I will have handled it a lot and put a lot of stress on it, I want to check these guides and make sure that they're all clocked appropriately so they're as good as it can possibly be, so there's no torque on the rod when it's being used in the real world. So I guess tip number 1 for this video is don't start your epoxy process until you've thoroughly load tested it and then recheck your guide placement after load testing. And tip number 2 is going to be about how I like to go about checking these guides. Now there are some laser tools for doing this, but I don't have one of those laser tools yet, so I'm kind of doing it, I guess you could say, old school way, just by sight. I could just hold it up like this, kind of like a rifle, and look down it like I'm sighting a rifle, which is pretty effective. Although when I do that, I want to do it with both eyes, and I don't mean both eyes together. I'll check it with just my right eye, check it with just my left eye, looking for anything out of place. But I want to show you another one that's really cool that I think is probably the most effective way to rifle sight these guides. And that method is this. I like to rest the tip on the floor, and then I like to press down on the rod just a little bit, because it totally changes the way I can look at these guides. It reminds me of when you ride a roller coaster and you're on your way down the hill and you see the hill apexing out, starting to level out. That's kind of what this looks like. And it just allows me a different perspective on these guides than what I have if I'm just holding it straight. Because when you're holding it straight, the guides themselves block the next guide. Whereas doing this, you can really see each of these guides and really get a different perspective than just, straight on. So that's tip number 2 of this video, I guess. Okay. After having load tested the blank and rechecked the guides to make sure they're where I want, the next thing is to start cleaning the blank. We want to get all the oils from our hands off there. I don't want any of that stuff contaminating the finish work. Or in this case, I'm about to put on a decal, and I want it to stick as well as possible. So there's really no substitute, in my opinion, when you're about to install a decal, for using some rubbing alcohol. It makes a big difference on how well the decal will adhere. You want to give it a few seconds for all that stuff to fully evaporate before you start your decal. But the real tip for this segment actually involves this. And I can't take credit for this because I just learned it from another YouTube channel, and I believe the name of that channel is Falconer Custom Rods. Fantastic channel, by the way. He's a far better rod builder than me by 100. But sharp dude, and he's got some good ideas, and one of them was the use of a roller for decal install. The first several rods that I did, I would go old school and just either use my fingertips or some sort of a pick to help me place the decal, or maybe I would lift it up with an X-Acto knife and place it that way. But It still left me with some imperfect edges, even though I would sometimes use the handle of the X-Acto knife to press the edges of the decal. But no matter if it's a decal like this that I'm about to stick on, or these clear ones here, the more traditional type from RAINSHADOW, you're not going to be able to get your edges down quite as well with your fingertips, or even with something like this, as what you can do with this roller. It really allows you to press all those edges and get that thing super flat so that it doesn't lift in any way when you start to put your finishing epoxy on there. So that's the next tip of the video. And I've got to focus to make sure that I really, get this as perfectly straight as possible. So I'm going to shut up and do that now, and then we'll move on to the next part of the video. All right, y'all, check it out. With my accent decals in place, it is time to finish this rod. And by that, I mean the clear coat finish, the epoxy that's going to go on all these guides. It's time for that, sort of, but I got to give you a tip for it, okay? Because you see all this clutter on my bench? Well, it's going to create a problem, and I'm going to tell you why. The tip is cleanliness means everything when it comes time to putting your finish on your guides. And I underestimated that early on, and it caused me some trouble and some heartache and some headache. And here's the deal. I want all this clutter gone. I want none of this thread and the bits of fuzz that go along with it. I want no dust that may have settled in the couple days that I've been working on this rod. I want it all gone. So we're going to clear off the entire bench. I'm going to wipe the area down, and then I'll start mixing up my clear coat. Let's get her going. Another way you can drastically reduce the amount of contamination that might get into your clear coat finish is make sure that if you have a ceiling fan in the area, you turn it off. Possibly an air conditioner vent that might be blowing directly on your work area, turn that off, because any additional dust that might be moving through the air is sure to find its way onto your epoxy, and that's going to mess up your work and give you some trouble. So you might as well avoid it if possible. All right, it's officially time to get it going with this finish. And once I get started, I'm probably not going to talk to the camera too much, because I like to focus in on what I'm doing, on the real critical stuff. So I want this to, I want it to come out as good as possible. And I don't know if you consider this an official tip for the video or not, but I did want to say that, in my opinion, spending a couple extra bucks for some of these epoxy syringes is money well spent. They're not much. I don't remember, like $2-3, something like that. And in my case, they came with the caps that go with the bottles there, and I've used them many times. I ordered several sets of syringes because I didn't know how many uses I could get out of them, and I'm still on my first set. So yeah, I think that's good enough to call it an official tip. Yeah, don't be a tightwad. Spend the extra for some epoxy syringes. Apparently it's important that you avoid regular syringes that might have silicone in them and get some designed for this purpose. I just don't see another way to really, feel confident that you got a correct ratio without those syringes. So I think they're worth the money. As far as the mixing process on the epoxy, I've seen a lot of videos that go really in depth on the process of mixing this, and there's probably something to that. However, I'm going to report slightly differently in my case. I've never used anything except this Generation 4 epoxy. I've used both the high build and the low build. By the way, they give me nothing for this recommendation. I buy that just like the next guy. But I'm guessing that there's been a lot of products on the market over the years that require a super meticulous mixing process in order to have a bubble-free result. I'm putting no effort into not introducing bubbles into this mix. I'm just going at it, and I'll mix it for about 3 minutes. I've never had a problem with it. There again, I've never used anything but that product. It's worked for me. So there's my opinion on that. I'm going to mix it for 3 minutes. I'm not being super careful. I'll let it sit for a few seconds before I begin applying it. And yeah, I'm going to move on, and I'm going to have another tip for you as far as the finishing process, something that's really helped me out. It took me many rods to figure this out. but it's really made a difference since I tried it. Alright, so admittedly I am nowhere near a master at finishing these guides. In fact, I wouldn't even say that I'm good at finishing these guides, to be honest with you. However, I do still think I've got some information that could be considered a reasonably good tip for beginners here. In my case, the first several rods that I put finish on, I would set my machine in the dry mode, and I would have it spinning at a fixed RPM. And I think that caused me a lot of problems. I think I underestimated how fast you can spin your rod while putting the finish on it, first of all, and so the dry mode just made sense to me. But additionally, I don't know, I guess I didn't think that I would have time to allow the machine to pause without this stuff dripping. However, that couldn't be farther from the truth. Once I began experimenting with leaving the machine in the wrap position so that I could spin it at whatever speed I desired, it's made a big difference, not only in the results that I get, but in the stress that this process causes me. I don't know, maybe stress is a bad way to describe it. I mean, it's just a hobby, right? But I don't know, if you really, I guess if you get too carried away with your expectations, it could get stressful, but that's self-induced. Anyway, yeah, I mean, as you notice here, I've got it stopped. And the first many rods that I built, I wouldn't have dared stop it. I thought it would be a disaster if I did, for whatever reason. And that's just not accurate. There's nothing wrong with letting it stop as long as you're, you know, somewhat mindful. Keep an eye on things and make sure that it's not sagging too much. Furthermore, when you get down to the butt end of the rod, I think that the speed is a major factor in how smooth that finish down toward the butt is going to come out. So there's that. All right, this next tip, I guess you could say it's about expectations and judging your work, right? My first several rods, I had it all wrong. My expectations were too high, and I was judging my work too early. And what I mean by that is, obviously your first few rods, the finish work might not be ideal. But I think where I was messing up is I would be doing this first coat and seeing things that I didn't like, and I really stressed out about it. But I think the problem was actually that I wasn't fully understanding how the rod finishes work. I underestimated how they have leveling properties. You know, they self-level to a degree. And then also, you know, you don't have to win the entire battle, or the entire war, I should say, in the first battle, right? You don't have to get it all handled in the first coat. There's nothing wrong with doing a second coat, or perhaps even a third. There might be situations where it comes out perfect in the first coat, but I haven't ran into that yet, not with my skill set. But I don't mind taking the time to do second coats when necessary. So anyway, there's my thoughts on that. Don't underestimate the product. If you're using a good finish, it's going to have some self-leveling properties, which will make it a little bit more forgiving. So there's no reason to freak out too early in the game. folks, the time has finally come. The time when I get to not only share the results of this project, the nicest back bouncing rod for trophy catfish that I have ever built, but also I get to share that announcement with you guys that I mentioned earlier in this series. And I know that at least a handful of y'all have been waiting on that moment for like 6 months. So we'll get to that in just a second, but first I'm gonna break this build down and show you how it turned out. So we're gonna be bumping or back bouncing for trophy catfish in deep water. That's the point of this rod. It's gotta be super sensitive. It needs to be fairly lightweight so that you don't get too much fatigue throughout the day from just working this thing for hours and hours and hours in search of the biggest fish in the river. So we accomplished that with a RAINSHADOW RX7 blank. It's got enough graphite in it to promote excellent sensitivity, but it's durable enough still to handle the biggest fish in the river. I've used a number of these blanks already and they have been stellar. So how else do we get sensitivity? Well, we're going to use a lot of carbon fiber and graphite. We've got some EVA over this real carbon fiber butt cap. That EVA is to protect my elbow and my side when I'm fighting fish. Got a couple of trim rings here to bring in this brilliant blue of these aluminum lock nuts up to another real carbon fiber grip that's going to transmit any of that shock in the blank right into this grip. And then the Toray carbon reel seat with a super exposed blank. Look, I mean, that is a ton of exposed blank, especially for a rod of this type. That's really going to send sensitivity through the roof. Double aluminum lock nuts here up to another real carbon fiber grip. Again, sending that shock right from the blank through the insert into this grip. Another blue trim ring. This logo we'll talk about in a moment. Some black on black going on here. We got the black wraps and the black frames. These are true stainless frames from ALPS with the trick blue aluminum oxide inserts. I'll show you a couple angles on that because I don't know how well that's showing up. The overall build is 7'4"1/4", which is a tick longer than I anticipated, but it's what it took to get me the exact action and power that I wanted for this particular build. And that's one of the thrills of going with a custom rod, is you can get exact. Absolutely no compromises whatsoever. This build came out to 5.8 ounces. That's all in. So it's still a featherweight, even though it's strong enough to handle those 100-pound blues from deep water out of the biggest rivers in America. Overall, I'm super thrilled with how this turned out. I'm beyond excited to use it. And I've got a 2-day trip planned for this weekend. I'll be filming both days, bumping up some big blues out of the Mississippi River. So hopefully, if that's something that you guys are into, you'll tune into those videos because I'm going to have at least a couple coming from this trip if all goes well. All that said, let's get on with that announcement. Check it out. I don't know how well it shows up because these aren't super high contrasting colors, but KarmaTech Custom Rods is now officially taking orders. When I made the first couple of posts on social media a few months ago about doing some rod building, right away I had a few inquiries about that, a few people interested. And then as time went on and I started putting out a couple of videos about rod building, that accelerated, started getting a small waiting list. And for those of you that got serious and got on the waiting list, check it out. Your blanks are back there. I've already got a couple going. I've started building the handles for the first 2 on the list. And I've got enough blanks there to fulfill the rest of that waiting list. And I'm now taking orders. So that's pretty exciting. It was something that I somewhat anticipated when I decided to build my own rods, but I really wasn't sure if I would go that route. I'm going to go that route. I've really enjoyed this. I've had fantastic results, and I figure why not make it available to more people. You guys can build this, but if you're not into that, I'll build it for you. All of my builds are going to be on RAINSHADOW blanks. All of my components are going to be ALPS or Forecast. If you have other requests, we can talk about those, but I don't know. I just think if you're going to go to the lengths of going with a custom rod, it might as well be the absolute best. And that's the way I've gone. I mean, check out this anchoring rod. I don't know how many people are going to want custom anchoring rods. It seems to be more of a market of people wanting the back bouncing type rod. But this is an example of the anchoring rods that I'm building myself. I built 5 different prototypes before settling on this series of blanks. Probably see some over here, and I've shown some in a recent video catching a giant flathead. But yeah, I built 5 different blanks, and then I settled in on this series from RAINSHADOW. This is a SWB blank. This is going to be my heavy action. I'll make anchoring rods in a light, a medium, and a heavy. I'll also do an extra heavy if people wanted them that heavy, but this is a pretty stout rod. It's the highest quality EVA that I know of, so it's going to be super durable and last a very long time. It's a really nice composite reel seat that will not come loose on you. True stainless guides, not the imitation stuff. This is your true stainless guides with aluminum oxide inserts with a real wide blue base, so you're not going to have to worry about your inserts popping out. I'm going with heavy action guides. They're real durable. They're not going to twist up. Black on black on black is what I'm building for myself, but other colors are an option. I'm not going to do decorative thread wraps. I don't have that skill set, and I'm not interested in working on that skill set. I'm more into the science and mechanics of building the best rod possible. So if you want a dock ski type of super artisanal artwork in your thread work, that's not where I shine. If you want surgical guide placement, absolute perfection in the way the guides sit on the spine, if you want absolutely perfect load sharing, that's what I do. Beyond that, you know, if it's a gift and you want the person's name on the rod, if you just want your favorite color worked into the rod, some odd handle size or length, those are all things that we can make happen for you. If you have a certain production rod that you like the power and action of and you want to try to match that, but you just want it your colors, those are all things that I can do. How do you go about ordering a Karmatech custom rod? Well, it's pretty easy. All you gotta do is send me an email. You send that email to karmatechrods@gmail.com. That email should, of course, include your name and your preferred contact phone number, but also go ahead and give me your shipping address in case we're going to be shipping that rod. Additionally, take the time to tell me a little bit about yourself and how and where you're going to fish. Tell me the bodies of water that you're going to fish the most, what species you're going after, and maybe tell me a little bit about the challenges that you've ran into in those waters and targeting those species, because I'll take the time to read through what you've provided me with and come up with the right blank and the right components to suggest to you before I ever call you. And then all you got to do is fill me in on you know, the custom aspects that you might want worked in there. Maybe it's your, I don't know, maybe your favorite team, or you want to memorialize a family member, whatever it is. We can work that into your build. I'll handle the mechanics of it on my end. So yeah, anchoring rods and bumping rods, particularly for trophy catfish, that's what I do. Although I suspect most of you are going to want the Lamborghini of bumping rods. So yeah, hit me up at karmatechrods@gmail.com, and I'll be happy to fix you up with exactly what you need or want. And last but not least, I just want to say thanks for watching another one of my videos, or in this case, a mini series of videos. If you enjoyed it, make sure you hit that thumbs up below your screen. If you want to see more like it, you should subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss future uploads, like the one of me catching great big catfish on this rod that you watched me build. See ya!